A Silicon Valley founder, praised as the next Steve Jobs, convinced billionaires and statesmen that her invention could read your entire health from a single drop of blood. At its peak, her startup soared to a $9 billion valuation until a hidden flaw risked patient lives and exposed a stunning deception at the heart of American medicine. How did so many extraordinary promises go unquestioned for so long? To understand, we need to go back to the very beginning. In 2003, a 19-year-old Stanford dropout named Elizabeth Holmes set out to change medicine forever. She believed that traditional blood testing, with its vials and needles, was outdated and needlessly painful. Holmes imagined a future where a single drop of blood could reveal almost anything about a person's health. With tuition money meant for her education, she launched a company from a tiny office in Palo Alto. She called it Theranos, a blend of the words therapy and diagnosis. Holmes did not work alone. She convinced her Stanford chemical engineering professor Channing Robertson to leave his career and join her as an advisor. Robertson's reputation gave the young company a touch of credibility, but Holmes's vision set the tone. Her first idea was a wearable patch that could scan for infections and deliver drugs automatically. When that proved impossible, she pivoted to something just as ambitious, a compact device that could run hundreds of blood tests from a finger prick sample using a proprietary microvial she called the nanotainer. From the start, secrecy was a strategy, not an accident. Holmes insisted that protecting her idea from competitors meant keeping nearly everything under wraps. Employees signed strict non-disclosure agreements. Even within the company, teams were separated. Engineers working on the device did not know what the chemists were doing, and vice versa. Holmes told her inner circle that this was how true innovation happened, by guarding the dream from anyone who might steal or slow it down. Investors were drawn in by the promise of a healthcare revolution. The pitch was irresistible, a world where routine blood work could be done in a pharmacy or at home, results ready in minutes, costs slashed, and lives saved. Holmes's confidence and clarity made disbelief seem almost foolish. She spoke in bold, simple terms, echoing her idol Steve Jobs. Her notebooks filled with phrases like, "First they think you are crazy, then they fight you, then you change the world." Theranos operated in near-total stealth for years. By 2007, the company had raised millions and reached a valuation of nearly $200 million, but few outside its walls knew what it was actually building. Holmes became known for her unwavering focus and her signature black turtlenecks. She cultivated an image of the lone visionary, relentless and unafraid to challenge the old guard. The myth of the young founder outsmarting the system began to take shape. Inside Theranos, belief in the mission blurred with pressure to deliver. Secrecy became a way of life, and questions were often met with silence or suspicion. Yet the promise remained, a single drop of blood and a new era of medicine. A company's reputation can be built as much by the company it keeps as by the products it makes. Theranos understood this and set out to collect some of the most recognizable names in American business and politics. The boardroom soon filled with former secretaries of state, retired generals, senators, and titans of industry. George Shultz, Henry Kissinger, Sam Nunn, and James Mattis were among them. None had backgrounds in diagnostics or laboratory science, but all carried decades of public trust. Their presence was more than symbolic. For investors and partners, it was a green light. If these men believed, who could doubt? Elizabeth Holmes courted the media with the same precision. Magazine covers compared her to Steve Jobs, highlighting her black turtlenecks and unwavering stare. Fortune, Forbes, and The New Yorker ran glowing profiles, painting Theranos as Silicon Valley's next great hope. Holmes became the world's youngest self-made female billionaire on paper. Her face splashed across business publications. Investors lined up, drawn by the promise and the pedigree. Betsy DeVos, Rupert Murdoch, and the Walton family committed hundreds of millions of dollars, often without demanding technical proof. Corporate America wanted in. Safeway, eager to modernize its in-store clinics, invested $350 million to build out wellness centers for Theranos testing. Construction crews worked through the night, tearing up grocery aisles to make room for a technology they had never seen in action. Walgreens, one of the country's largest pharmacy chains, agreed to pilot Theranos blood testing in Arizona stores. The deal promised a new era of healthcare, instant results, no needles, and a test center on every corner. Walgreens executives, wary of missing the next big thing, pressed forward despite incomplete data and missed deadlines. Inside Theranos, the pressure mounted. Each new partnership brought more deadlines, more scrutiny, and more at stake. The company's value soared past $9 billion, but behind closed doors, technical teams struggled to make the device work as promised. Board meetings focused on strategy, not science. Most directors never saw the lab, never reviewed clinical data, and rarely pressed for details. Prestige became its own form of validation. The presence of Schultz and Kissinger was enough to quiet doubts, both inside and outside the company. The world saw a company destined to change medicine. Investors and partners saw a chance to be part of history. But beneath the glossy surface, cracks had already begun to form. The next challenge would not come from the outside world, but from within the walls of Theranos itself. Inside the engineering labs at Theranos, the promise of hundreds of tests from a single drop of blood collided with the reality of hardware that simply could not deliver. The core of the system was the nanotainer, a tiny glass vial less than 13 millimeters tall, designed to collect under 150 microliters of blood, barely a fraction of what standard lab tests required. Engineers quickly discovered that this minuscule sample size brought a host of problems. Blood clotted or evaporated before it could even be analyzed. For many tests, there just was not enough material to get reliable results. The Edison Analyzer, Theranos' much-touted device, fared no better. Internal quality control logs showed wild swings in test results, sometimes varying by more than 20% from one run to the next. In the world of clinical diagnostics, even a 10% difference can mean the line between healthy and sick. Repeated attempts to validate the machine failed. Cholesterol, potassium, thyroid hormones, basic markers came back inconsistent or flat out wrong. When the numbers did not match up, managers sometimes asked teams to rerun tests or dilute samples, hoping to nudge the results into an acceptable range. Assay failures piled up. Engineers flagged that the Edison could only handle a dozen or so tests, not the 240 advertised. For the rest, Theranos quietly relied on commercial analyzers from companies like Siemens and Roche, but the illusion had to be kept alive. Employees were warned not to discuss the true capabilities of the device, even with colleagues in other departments. Questions about reliability were met with pressure to keep working and keep quiet. Quality control spreadsheets circulated among lab staff painted a clear picture. The Edison's coefficient of variation, how much results jumped around, often exceeded 20%, far above the industry standard. In some cases, the same patient's blood, run twice in a row, would produce two different diagnoses. Engineers and scientists began to worry about the consequences. If the data was this unreliable in the lab, what would happen when real patients depended on it? The technical failures were not just a matter of missed deadlines or disappointed investors. They carried the risk of real harm, and the people building the machines saw it firsthand. The next challenge would be what to do with that knowledge in a company built on secrecy. Inside Theranos, every hallway and meeting room became a boundary. Employees entered through locked doors, swiped badges, and signed non-disclosure agreements that threatened career-ending lawsuits for even the smallest breach. The company's legal team, led by heavyweight attorneys, drafted agreements so sweeping that staff were warned not to discuss their work with friends, family, or even colleagues in other departments. New hires sat through orientation sessions that emphasized secrecy above all else. The message was clear: questions were dangerous. Curiosity could get you fired. Work was divided into silos. Chemists, engineers, and software developers worked on different floors, often without knowing how their contributions fit together. A scientist might spend months perfecting a reagent, never learning how or even if it would be used in the final device. The few who asked too many questions were called into closed-door meetings with management. Some left the building escorted by security, their emails and badge access cut off by the end of the day. Security cameras watched the labs and office spaces at all hours, creating a culture of surveillance. Employees whispered about rumors of emails being monitored and private investigators tailing those who resigned. When technical staff realized that most patient samples were being sent to commercial analyzers from Siemens and Roche, not the Edison device, they were told to keep quiet. The company's own machines, the heart of its promise, sat idle while third-party equipment churned through tests in locked rooms. Only a handful of insiders knew the truth, and they were warned that leaking information could mean financial ruin or blacklisting from the industry. Theranos' legal team responded swiftly to any sign of dissent. Staff who raised concerns about test accuracy or patient safety were met with reminders of their legal obligations or threatened with lawsuits. Some received letters from outside law firms within days of resigning, demanding the return of confidential materials and warning of severe penalties for talking to regulators or journalists. The pressure to deliver results grew with every new partnership and media headline. But as technical problems mounted, the company's culture tightened. Meetings became shorter, answers more guarded. Even casual conversations in the break room could be reported to management. For those who saw the gap between Theranos' claims and its reality, the walls felt as if they were closing in. Inside this atmosphere of surveillance and fear, the only way to break the silence would be to risk everything. Encrypted phone calls, burner emails, and coded messages became the lifelines for those inside Theranos who could no longer ignore what they had witnessed. Tyler Schultz, grandson of board member George Schultz, faced a choice few could imagine: stay silent and protect his family's legacy, or speak up and risk everything. Tyler documented erratic test results and internal spreadsheets that did not match what was being reported to partners. Each attempt to raise concerns inside the company was met with stonewalling or threats. When he finally confided in his grandfather, the response was disbelief. George Schultz invited Theranos executives to family meetings, hoping to pressure Tyler into silence. Instead, Tyler turned to a Wall Street Journal reporter, John Carreyrou, using a burner phone to avoid detection. Erica Chung, another young scientist, saw the same pattern of failures and cover-ups. She watched as lab results were quietly swapped, and employees were told to rerun tests until the numbers looked right. After resigning, Chung received letters from Theranos attorneys warning her not to talk. She began to notice strange cars parked outside her apartment and suspected she was being followed. The company's legal team, led by David Boyes, unleashed private investigators and threatened lawsuits that could wipe out a lifetime of savings. Carreyrou's investigation unfolded in secret. He built trust with whistleblowers through encrypted chats and late-night calls, piecing together a story that Theranos fought to keep buried. Legal threats arrived at the Wall Street Journal offices, demanding the story be killed. Boyes himself visited the newsroom to argue that Carreyrou's sources were lying, but the evidence kept piling up: emails, quality control logs, and first-hand accounts. When the first article ran in October 2015, the effect was immediate. Investors panicked, regulators took notice, and the public's faith in Theranos began to crack. The silence inside the company had finally broken, and the consequences would ripple far beyond its walls. Federal agencies moved quickly once the truth about Theranos became public. In January 2016, the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services sent a letter to Elizabeth Holmes documenting serious violations in the company's California lab. The agency found that Theranos' practices put patients in immediate jeopardy. Within months, CMS banned Holmes from owning or operating a clinical laboratory for 2 years. The company's flagship blood testing operation was effectively shut down overnight. The Securities and Exchange Commission followed. In March 2018, the SEC charged Holmes and former President Sunny Balwani with massive fraud, alleging they had misled investors out of more than $700 million. The SEC complaint detailed how Theranos overstated its technology and business performance, using fake demonstrations and doctored reports to secure funding. Holmes agreed to relinquish voting control of the company and return millions of shares. Balwani fought the charges, but federal prosecutors pressed on. Theranos itself tried to survive, searching for a buyer or new investor, but the damage was done. In September 2018, the board voted to dissolve the company. Years of secrecy and hype ended in a single quiet memo to shareholders. Theranos was no more. The legal reckoning did not stop there. Holmes stood trial in 2021 and was found guilty on 4 counts of fraud and conspiracy. He received a sentence of more than 11 years in federal prison. Balwani's trial ended with a conviction on all counts and a sentence of nearly 13 years. Their downfall sent shockwaves through Silicon Valley and the biotech industry. The collapse of Theranos forced regulators, investors, and entrepreneurs to rethink how medical startups are evaluated. The case triggered new compliance protocols for diagnostics and greater scrutiny of board claims. In
the wake of a $9 billion collapse, the industry learned that trust, once lost, cannot be rebuilt by vision alone.
Startups still chase disruption, investors still bet on vision over verification, and healthcare decisions still hinge on trust. Today, federal regulators cite Theranos as a warning, but loopholes remain. As billions flow into unproven health tech, the real test isn't innovation, it's accountability. In medicine, hope without evidence comes at a human cost. What safeguards would you demand before the next revolution claims to change your life?